"We don't want your kind in here. Go find somewhere else." The bar owner's voice was cold, like ice sliding down glass. He stood blocking the doorway, arms crossed, a sneer on his face. "You look like you'll cause trouble." If you believe judging someone by how they look is wrong, type "respect all" in the comments. Sergeant John Miller, a man who had seen more of the world than this young owner could ever imagine, simply blinked. He was in his late 50s, his clothes were neat but worn, and his face carried the quiet lines of a life lived with honor and difficulty. He wasn't looking for trouble. He was just looking for a quiet drink and a reunion. John adjusted the simple, unadorned cap on his head. It was a habit, a small comfort. "I'm just here to meet some friends," he said, his voice calm and even. "We arranged to meet here." The owner, a man named Rick, with slicked back hair and a sense of self-importance that far outweighed his actual importance, scoffed. "Friends, huh? What kind of friends meet in a place like this? This is a respectable establishment." He looked John up and down again, his gaze lingering on John's slightly faded jacket. "And frankly, you don't look like you can afford our prices." John felt a familiar weariness settle over him. It wasn't the first time he'd been judged this way. He had served his country for 30 years, faced dangers most people only saw in movies, and led men through unimaginable trials. He had medals, tucked away in a box at home, medals he never spoke of. He didn't need parades or loud thanks, just quiet respect, just the chance to be treated like any other person. He carried a small, worn notebook in his pocket. Inside, among other things, were phone numbers. Numbers of men he'd served with. Numbers of people who understood. "I assure you, sir," John said, still polite, "I'm just here for a quiet get-together. My friends are expecting me." Rick let out a short, ugly laugh. "I'm sure they are. Look, old man, I'm not going to argue. My bar, my rules. And my rule is, you're not coming in." He puffed out his chest a little. "Don't want your type scaring off my regular customers." John looked past Rick, into the dimly lit bar. It was mostly empty. A couple of people at a table in the corner glanced over, then quickly looked away. They didn't want to get involved. He understood. Most people didn't. "Your kind?" John asked quietly, his eyes meeting Rick's. "What kind is that exactly?" "You know what I mean," Rick sneered. "People who look like they haven't got 2 pennies to rub together. People who probably cause fights." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was somehow louder than a shout. "This is an upstanding place. We have standards." John's hand instinctively went to his pocket, touching the outline of his old service wallet. It held more than just money. It held memories and a few carefully kept contacts. He thought of the men he was supposed to meet, his old unit. They'd understand if he was late, or if he suggested another place. But something about Rick's smug face, his casual cruelty, made John pause. This wasn't just about him. It was about the way people were treated, the assumptions made based on nothing. He felt the anger, a cold, tight knot in his chest. Not the hot anger of a young man, but the tired, steady anger of someone who had seen too much unfairness. But he kept his voice steady. "Is there a manager I could speak to?" Rick grinned, a flash of white teeth. "You're looking at him. Owner, manager, chief bottle, washer. And I'm telling you, no entry." He made a shooing motion with his hand. "Now, move along before I have to call someone to make you move." The threat hung in the air. John knew he could walk away. He could find another bar. He could call his friends and tell them plans had changed. It would be easier. But then, Rick would win. Rick would go on thinking he could treat people this way. Have you ever been treated unfairly by someone in charge? Type "unfair" below if you know this feeling. John took a slow breath. He wasn't a troublemaker. He was a soldier. And soldiers didn't back down from a fight when they knew they were right, even if the fight was a quiet one, fought with words and principles instead of weapons. He remembered a promise from an old friend, now in a civilian oversight role. "If you ever see something wrong, John, something that needs a fair eye, you call me. Doesn't matter what it is." He nodded slowly, not at Rick, but to himself. "All right," he said softly. He stepped back from the doorway, pulling out his old, slightly battered cell phone. Rick watched him, a smirk playing on his lips. "Calling your buddies to rough me up, old-timer. I'm not scared." John didn't answer. He scrolled through his contacts, found the number he was looking for, and pressed call. He kept his voice low as he spoke, so low Rick couldn't make out the words, only the calm, measured tone. He explained the situation simply, factually. Not his rejection, but what he had observed about the establishment itself, even from the doorway, the overflowing bins in the alley visible from the side, the general grimy look of the entrance. A peculiar smell he'd noticed. He was a man trained to observe details after all. He finished the call. "Thank you," he said into the phone, then put it away. He looked at Rick, his expression unreadable. "What was that all about?" Rick demanded, his bravado wavering just a tiny bit. "Who'd you call?" "The complaint department." He chuckled, but it sounded forced. John just stood there waiting. He didn't say anything. The silence stretched. Rick started to look a little uneasy. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. Maybe 5 minutes passed. It felt longer. The couple in the corner were now openly staring. Then, a car pulled up to the curb. Not a police car. A plain, dark sedan. A woman got out. She was dressed in a neat business suit and carried a clipboard. She looked official, very official. She walked straight towards the bar entrance, her eyes scanning everything. She didn't even glance at John. Rick's smirk vanished. His face went pale. Can I help you, ma'am?" he stammered, trying to sound confident but failing miserably. The woman looked at him, then at the sign above the door. "Rick's place?" she asked, her voice crisp and professional. "Yes, that's right," Rick said. "I'm Rick, the owner." "Good," the woman said, not smiling. "I'm Eleanor Vance, City Health Department. We've received a credible report concerning potential health code violations at this establishment. I'm here for an immediate inspection." Rick's jaw dropped. Health inspector? Now? But there must be some mistake. Eleanor Vance consulted her notes. "No mistake, Mr. Rick. The report was quite specific. Shall we begin in the kitchen?" She didn't wait for an answer, already stepping past him towards the interior of the bar. Rick scrambled after her, his face a mask of panic. "Wait, you can't just. We're very clean. Top-notch. Ask anyone." His voice was high, pitched now. John watched them go. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. He turned and walked a little way down the street, then leaned against a wall, waiting for his friends. He knew they'd find him. From inside the bar, muffled shouts could be heard, Rick's panicked excuses, and Eleanor Vance's calm, firm responses. The sounds of things being opened, inspected. "What do you think the inspector will find? Type justice if you hope Rick gets what he deserves." About 20 minutes later, Eleanor Vance emerged from the bar. Her expression was grim. Rick trailed behind her, looking like a deflated balloon. He was sweating, and his slicked-back hair was now messy. "Mr. Rick," Eleanor said, loud enough for John to hear, "this is one of the most concerning inspections I've conducted in months. The violations are numerous and serious. Improper food storage, evidence of pest infestation, unsanitary preparation surfaces, the list goes on." Rick wrung his hands. But it's just a few minor things. We can fix them, I promise." Eleanor shook her head. "These are not minor, sir. These are direct risks to public health." She handed him a thick sheaf of papers. "This is a notice of temporary closure. You will cease operations immediately until these violations are rectified and a full re-inspection is passed. There will also be significant fines." Temporary closure, significant fines. The words hung in the air. Rick looked like he was about to cry. "Closed? But my business, my regulars." "Your first concern should be the health of your patrons, Mr. Rick, not your profits," Eleanor stated coolly. She then turned and for the first time seemed to notice John. She gave him a very slight, almost imperceptible nod. A nod of acknowledgement. John nodded back just as slightly. Rick followed her gaze and saw John. His face, already pale, turned a shade of grey. He stared at John, comprehension dawning in his eyes. He didn't understand how, but he knew, somehow, this quiet old man was connected to the sudden arrival of the health inspector. The man he had sneered at, called names, and refused entry. He opened his mouth, then closed it. What could he say? Eleanor Vance got back into her car and drove away. Rick was left standing on the sidewalk, the closure notice fluttering in his trembling hand. The sign for Rick's Place suddenly looked sad and dirty. A few minutes later, two men, around John's age, walked up. They had the same quiet strength about them. "John, there you are." One of them called out, "We were wondering what happened. Place looks closed." John pushed himself off the wall. "Change of plans, boys," he said, a small, almost invisible smile touching his lips. "Let's find somewhere else. My treat." As they walked away, Rick was still standing there, staring at the official papers. He looked up as John passed, his eyes wide. He seemed to want to say something, perhaps an apology, perhaps an accusation, but no words came out. He just watched the unassuming older man walk away with his friends, a man he had judged so wrongly, a man who had, with one quiet phone call, brought a swift and just consequence to his arrogance. The story of Rick's Place and the sudden health inspection became a bit of a local legend. Some said the owner learned his lesson, cleaned up his act, and eventually reopened a much better, humbler establishment. Others said he never recovered. John Miller never talked about it. He continued his quiet life, meeting his friends, respecting others, and expecting the same in return. He knew that true strength wasn't about being loud or flashy. It was about quiet dignity, integrity, and knowing that sometimes a single well-placed call could ensure fairness prevailed. The real lesson here is about respect. Respect for everyone, no matter how they look or who you think they are, because you never know the quiet power or the hidden worth someone might carry. If you believe that veterans, and indeed all people, deserve respect and dignity, please subscribe to our channel for more stories like this, and remember, don't judge a book by its cover. The quietest people often have the most powerful stories.